secret is I just smile and say, live for today. I'm sitting on top of the world, on top of the sun came up and I gotta say, see it in a whole new way. I'm sitting on top of the world, on top of the world, on top of the world.
Well, welcome everyone to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. And we are having another author's edition where we talk to some of the most intriguing authors that I have had the opportunity to meet, chat with, and read their book. That's the important part. You got to be able to dig in on their thoughts and their emotions on these pieces of these masterpieces that they produce. So today, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Arnette Travis. Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Hi, Tanya. I'm so happy to be here. I love every podcast of yours that I've seen. I have to confess, I've not seen everyone, but I've seen more than enough to know that you're doing a great job and a great service, not only to the authors, but to the community as well. Everyone who tunes in, your entire listening audience.
Well,
Great
I hope
service.
they find this just as beneficial because, ma'am, from what I know about you, the one thing I can say is that you are incredibly humble. There's so many pieces and so many layers to your story that people have not actually been able to tap into. Mostly, I think, maybe because of a little fear. Sometimes people fear the unknown, right? And there are so many pieces about you that are unknown. But the one thing we do know about you is that you are an activist, a community activist, and an incredible author. So let's go ahead and dig in on your book, Bitch. I just wanted to say that because I know how much that irritates you. And I wanted to say that because the title of the book is Bitch, but it ain't her favorite word. So we are going to get into this book, why she actually entitled it what she did, and what this means to her. So without further ado, ma'am, go ahead and drop it on us. What is it about this book that people really need to know?
Well, I'm going to back up or backtrack a little bit on something you just said about, people, the way people perceive you. And it took me a long time. I mean, into halfway of my life before I realized that some people like viewed me as a threat or some type of superwoman, overconfident. She's got it all under control. In essence, what in common knowledge, I should say, the jargon of the day, a bitch. And I didn't even realize that for a long time. Actually, it was my former sales assistant at Dean Witter. I was a financial advisor for 24 years with major wirehouses. But she literally referred to me as a bitch. She said, "You used to be a real bitch." And I'm like, how is that? Because that's one word I just got.
She said that?
My sales assistant, absolutely. She said, "You're nice now, but you used to be a real bitch." And I was like, and this is after she was no longer my sales assistant, to her credit, I guess. But I asked her, "You got to tell me why." And she said, "Well, because you're, basically I'm an exacting person. I say I used to be perfect. I'm no longer perfect. I get that perfection is something that we as human beings generally are not able to attain. If we do, it's kind of accidental in many cases. But at any rate, she felt that my demanding, certain or having expectations of certain work product was being a bitch, when she actually worked for another broker, a male, who was 10 times worse than me in terms of his exacting nature, what he expected from her, and the lengths that he was willing to go to extract that work product, which included a lot of overtime, which to me was unnecessary. But I digress. The book is entitled Bitch, with the subtitle, A Definitive and Restorative Guide, because there are the word is used. I mean, if you look in under definitions for bitch, there's thousands of them, literally. References everything to a man that's considered weak, to a woman who's considered, the tough boss, and everything in between. And it has come to be, I'm going to say, while I love hip hop, um, they did a job with the word, and the word became almost an anthem for a lot of younger women to say, I'm me, that's me, I'm a bad B word, right? I use the hashtag retire bitch for the simple reason that we have been able to retire other words. For example, without saying it, the F word to describe men who prefer relationships with other men. We don't say that. I haven't heard that word, the F word, used for men in a long, long time. And so we're able to do that. It speaks to our ability to understand that a word is offensive to whomever you're applying it to, and that we can stop using it.
Okay, so you just said there's tons of definitions of the word bitch.
Right.
Were you looking in the Urban Dictionary?
I
Because
looked
I
in the
just
Urban
knew
Dictionary. I did.
it
I
was a
did.
female dog. Now, you start
Exactly.
talking about men being weak. That definitely sounds like something the Urban Dictionary might go ahead and
Right.
throw out there. But the
Yeah.
fact that you did your research before you wrote this book and you
Oh.
felt the need and empowered to still write it. Talk to me about that. What gave you, first of all, I understand that writing a book is a little difficult. It's not the easiest thing. So, what gave you the passion to write this book? It's not one of the easiest things to do, and this subject is pretty controversial.
Absolutely. And I say absolutely because it's when you talk about the research that I expended on this book, it turned out to be a lot more than I originally anticipated. I felt that initially that using anecdotal advice, for example, or anecdotal uh, information and knowledge would be sufficient because everybody knows. But as I started actually writing it, I realized, this whole thing with the feminist movement, and when I say this whole thing, I mean in recent years where we think we've made so many strides forward since the 60s and the 70s, only to see so many of those steps forward rolled backwards, particularly in terms of state legislatures, which are still putting forward very misogynistic, oppressive rules on women. I mean, this latest attempt to, I guess some Republican senators have requested that the Supreme Court rescind or reverse Roe versus Wade. Well, that is really going to take us back into a really dark place. My mother said something a long time ago that I remembered with regard to this current attempt to overturn legislation favorable to women. And it was this, and it speaks directly to the anti-abortionists. She said, when you got pregnant in my day, and you're talking the 40s and the 50s, you had it. Okay. So it didn't matter because so many people were engaging in it's almost an archaic term in some ways, because people have always engaged in premarital sex, right? And so it's accepted now, but why are we going to go back to those dark days even before time? I mean, when I say before time, before recorded history, where women were using herbs and different things to abort children that they did not want. It seemed like there were so many different attacks coming at us. Not it seemed, there are, and they're all documentable, attempts to overturn women's rights. And that right there, I'm sorry, and I'm not, I'm pro-life. That's what I am. I'm pro-life, but I am also pro-choice, because no one should be able to tell you what you do with your body. Even doctors, if you're under a doctor's care, and he says, I want you to stop eating pig feet, for example, okay? People will still eat pig feet. The doctor's not going to monitor them. He's going to say, you shouldn't be eating that. But hey, people are going to do what they want to do regardless. And when we force women, which seems to be the way of our society, into making dangerous choices, or we're limiting those choices to dangerous options, where we just might as well equip everybody with a suicide pill.
Man, I have heard a lot of stories about things that women did before abortions were legal, and that scared me. Like, I was afraid for any young girl that I know that may find themselves in a situation where they feel like they can't tell their parents what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they can't, I don't know, go to the police about what happened. They feel like they're not going to be able to carry a child for whatever reason, and going to the extremes, in essence, hurting themselves to try to do something that they can't legally get. So I really hope that people take that kind of stuff into consideration when they're making laws and regulations that govern other people and their bodies and their choices. Because at this point, since we're in COVID and no one wants anybody telling them that their kids have to wear masks, we definitely don't want anybody telling us women what we can and cannot do with our bodies. But I wanted to go back, since you brought your mom up, and talk a little bit about your upbringing. Like, tell me a little bit about you. Tell the people who you are, where you came from, and what that was like.
So it's interesting you want to go back there.
Uh-oh.
I just
Arnette, you there?
Yeah, I am. Do you
Sorry.
see me now? I know.
Yeah, I see
had
you
a
now.
call come in. I should have blocked the calls. I didn't. I apologize. Hopefully there
No
won't be
worries.
any
Go
more.
ahead.
But I just finished reading Isabel Wilkerson's book on the Great Migration, The Warmth of Other Suns.
Yes.
And I had read Caste a while back, but I hadn't opened this second. Well, it's actually her first book up. So my beginnings, I was actually born at home in Indian summer day. My mother said it was 101 degrees. She'd been in labor for 3 days. She kind of held that against me because it was apparently very painful labor, not only long, but painful. And I was at birth 12 pounds, 12 ounces. So that's a pretty big
Good
baby.
Lord.
That's like a 2 or 3 month old child, right?
Yes.
But that's the way I came into the world, the third daughter of my mother and father. And my mother and father stayed together until I was about 5, shortly before I was 5 years old. And I never really knew why my father walked away. It always bothered me. I would tell my sisters, I miss having a dad, because I would read a lot. One of my favorite books growing up was the Five Little Peppers series about some children growing up on the plains, the Southwest. But I was an avid reader from the time I was 4 years old. I love to read. I love to learn. I experienced trauma early in life, and that was the death of my oldest sister, Barbara. She was murdered by her husband. She in the South. So I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and my mother worked 3, 4, 5 jobs to take care of us. And I also say, in all fairness, and my mother is no longer here, but I know that she would not object to me saying this, or at least I feel like she wouldn't. And that is that part of the reason she worked so hard was because she was accustomed to having life a certain way, to being able to enjoy certain things. Like one of her pet projects was redecorating the house every 5 years. And I mean, repainting, new furniture, except for a few things, that were really valuable items that she kept, like the Duncan Fife sofa, but she was accustomed to having everything because she'd grown up having a lot. And we weren't rich, but we never wanted for anything. A lot of what I read as particularly the urban Black experience, we didn't have. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, so it wasn't overcrowded. We never rented. We owned a home from, from day one. In fact, my grandparents had several rental properties, including a custom built house that my grandfather, who was a stonemason, built. So people thought we were rich, but because of the house we lived in, but we were not rich at all. But again, we never wanted for anything. But I was very much aware, because after the death of my sister, my mother's brother, who was part of the Great Migration after World War II, which he fought in, he had moved to Detroit. And following the death of my sister, he would come and get us every summer and take us to Detroit for a month. And I loved it. I mean, it was in the heyday of Motown, and I got to see something that I didn't see in Lexington. And that was vibrant Black communities, and that were an economic force in and of themselves. I saw the Black professionals holding jobs in government that I didn't really see in Lexington. We had one Black city council member, Harry Sykes, and he was the only one for quite some time. But it opened up a whole new world for me. And so right after high school, literally the day after, I moved to Detroit and kind of made my way from there. I did something that it wasn't the wisest thing to do, is that I walked away from a 4-year scholarship at UK because I literally hated the Jim Crow South. And I can't say it any other way than that, because it felt so limiting, particularly after I was exposed to the big city, Detroit, and what was possible. And thankfully, through my own hard work efforts and just will to survive and to thrive, I was able to make my way and extend, or I should say capture my education, get back into that and everything later on. But initially, it was very exciting for me to leave the Jim Crow South and to go into a world where one of the best things that's ever happened to me was that I realized that all white people were not Jim Crow literate. Okay.
One of the things that you did say, which is incredibly important, is exposure. You were exposed to something different that gave you an understanding that there is something different. There is more out there than this, that, and the other. What is one of the most impactful experiences that you had leaving home?
Well, I kind of just alluded to it or said it, and that is the realization that people are people, that when you define and narrow your definition or understanding of the world to what your lived experience is, that you really you're cutting yourself off. And I realized that immediately. I entered a world. So one of the things I did the first day I was there, was to sign up, because I had I could type 70 words a minute with like one mistake, and I had great secretarial skills. So I signed up with a temporary service, Alston at the time. And I was assigned to a job that I kept for over 3 months, and then moved on to a job that I was offered that gave me provided me with promotions and that kind of thing. But I realized right off the bat that I was judged by what I could do, not by the color of my skin. And that was an incredible experience for me, coming up as I did in the Jim Crow South. It made all the difference in the world to me at a very early time in life.
So talk to me about how someone can acknowledge that our country, right, can be merit-based. I said can be, because we know that's not always the case.
Not always.
and still acknowledge a level of systemic racism, because they can both exist. And I think it's hard for people, some people, to acknowledge that they can both exist. There can be a meritocracy, a merit-based system where people do acknowledge your abilities, your capabilities, your accomplishments, but there are still systems that, even as accomplished and talented as you are, can be held back based on your skin color. Talk to me about
Right.
that.
So you bring up a point that is so problematic today, and having had the lived experience that I've had and the opportunities that I've had and taken advantage of, not always, but a lot of them I did take advantage of, is that it's a problem if you are trying to accept personal responsibility for something a system you did not create. So responsibility is different from acknowledgement, right? So
Yes.
the acknowledgement of it is one piece, and you're not going to get any further than how can I say, denial, if you do not acknowledge that systemic racism exists, that there are people who will not look at you because of your merit or your ability to do a particular thing. Rather, they will look at you just as the color of your skin. So that kind of self-denial or denial of reality is something that is very problematic and in today's world. And part of the reason it is because of that second piece, responsibility. So I wasn't responsible for Jim Crow laws. I was affected and forced to comply with them at a certain point in my life. But it's just like racism today. I see racism, I don't buy into it. And when I say I don't buy into it, is that I know it's there. I know that there are racist practices, there are racist people, but I don't give them any measure. I can't, because they're not my responsibility. I'm not going to treat you like, just because you're white, that you're responsible for what happened to me, in 1961. Okay. I can't do that because you weren't there. You're not responsible, even though I acknowledge that was the case then. It's not now. And so people have to check themselves, I think, their consciousness, myself included. One of the things I thought, and I said for years, until just literally this past year, is that Black people can't be racist. Well, I'd always had a problem with that, from the standpoint that my own mother, who could pass for white, was racist against white people and Black people. In some cases, it was like, I would never have a Black doctor. And I'm like, oh my God, Mom, what are you saying? And then she'd tell this story about a doctor in Lexington, a Black doctor who had made a wrong diagnosis, and the patient almost died, right? So and then as far as white people, she was like, I hate white people. That's white people stuff. And she would just go on. I mean, just countless examples. But I had to understand that I was not that Black person who was racist, right? I knew people are people based on who they are, how they act, what they do, what they subscribe to. And so while we can all pretty much, well, hopefully acknowledge that systemic racism and racism is a thing. It does exist. We have to check ourselves to make sure that we don't buy into it, that we're not contributing to it, that our own learned and lived experiences are such that we can look at them and say, oh, I did not realize that was an example of my white privilege. But it was, because I'd never gone into a store and had a clerk walk up to me and say, can I help you? When all you did was walk in the store. You haven't even had a chance to decide which aisle or which, garment you're going to look at first. That's one of those things that people have to open their minds to and say, am I contributing to this? So you can't help your privilege, is what I say to white people. You didn't invent it. So why are you going to deny that it exists? Why would you? If you had no place or responsibility, you had no onus on you to have generated that system that created white privilege. However, if you are taking advantage of it, like the so-called Karens nowadays, who think, oh my God, I'm white and this black man's over there with his dog and oh, he's got binoculars, he must be looking at me. No, he's looking at birds, dummy. But to think that just because, and then you play that card to the extent that the particular Karen I'm talking about did, to call the police. Yeah, it's crazy. Then you are contributing. Then you are responsible. Okay. But otherwise, no, you're not responsible. You're not.
It's a whole other thing. We could talk about this forever, but I do want to ask you a little bit more about your book and how much of your upbringing, right, and your childhood was reflected between these covers.
So I'm a Southern girl. I mean, I've lived most of my life in urban areas, Detroit, New York, San Francisco, LA. But at my heart, I'm a Southern girl. And they're just things that you don't say. So I say this in the book that the phone rings. And back in the day, if you were downstairs and someone was upstairs, and you could pick up conceivably the phone at the same time, which is what happened to me. My girlfriend was calling me to ask if I was going to some party or something. And I said, not knowing that my mother had picked up the downstairs extension at the same time that I had upstairs and was listening, I said, no, that bitch won't let me go. Well, from that day on, I literally hated the word bitch. I went downstairs a few minutes after I finished the call, and my mother was sitting in the kitchen with tears running down her face. And my mother was tough. She did not cry, okay, over words or nothing. But to have heard her daughter, her youngest daughter, call her that, refer to that as her friend, that's what she said to me. That's the way, she said, bitch, that's the way you refer to me to your friends. And I was like, will the hole just open up right now in the middle of this kitchen floor? Because I want to fall through, right? That literally was the beginning of my hating the word. Before, it was like, it's a dog. I was an early teenager, but I didn't hear words like that. It wasn't like it is now, where everybody's being called the B word.
It's a casual term now. It's very casual, to the point where people are calling themselves that.
Oh yeah, and it's a badge of strength, of honor or something. I'm bad. No. So that,
I got a few other words that I would prefer people call me, but we'll get into that another time. I think you have a passage for our audience to hear a little bit from the amazing author about the book. You ready?
I'm ready.
Have at it.
It's actually toward the end of the book. It's called Gag 1.0, and gag is get a grip. And the title is Work from the Inside Out. Many people subscribe to beliefs and systems that they themselves did not formulate. In many cases, the why of a belief is unknown, and the belief itself is accepted and valid as true, with little, if any, thought or consideration as to whether it is reasonable, true, or holds any merit, application, or benefit to anyone. It is only through introspection and the recall of past incidents that someone will be led to examine why they believe what they do. So I urge everybody to examine your belief system, look at it, see, does it even apply nowadays? It applies to whether you refer to yourself as the B word, understanding what that word really is, to racism. Am I practicing racism and don't really know it? It's an unintentional thing. Am I taking advantage of someone without, their knowledge, or I should say acquiescence, because, to some extent we all agreed to do certain things. But I think introspection is one of the strongest tools that we as human beings can learn and develop.
And for the most part, many of us are moved in action and moved in our ways by triggers, things that trigger us to look at things differently, things that trigger us, like that word does with you. You are triggered to think about how you made your mother feel. And
Right.
I want to ask you, how much of what you went through as a young person, as a child, even as a young adult, is played out in your life as a mother?
Oh, wow. So there were a couple of things, but I'm going to go back to the one that I mentioned earlier with regard to my daughter. I'm sorry, to my sister. My oldest sister, Barbara, was only 15 when she was killed. So, having grown up in the South, I mean, she became pregnant at age 13. She got married, went across the state lines to Indiana, where she passed for 16, which was the legal age there to get married. And she came back to Kentucky with her new husband and had the child, and they were trying to make a life. She realized very early on that she had made a mistake, that, my mother was very strict and had us doing, we all had chores to do in addition to our homework, that kind of thing. She thought that was too hard a life, and that married life would give her some kind of freedom. Those are things that I mean, when my oldest daughter hit 13, I literally was in a panic. When I hit 13, because I was 10 at the time that my sister was murdered, I thought, I've got to really be careful. I really got to watch myself. So I became very, how can I say, sex averse. It was okay to kiss me, but, nothing else was going to happen. It's, it stayed with me that a jealous man could really do me harm, and that having had the experience that I did with my sister's husband, who only spent 2.5 years in prison for murdering my sister, I realized that two things: as a woman and as a Black woman, there was very little that the law was going to do to protect me from a jealous man. So I lived my life, and I told my daughters the same thing, is that, you don't get with a jealous man. They are jealousy is something that is, I don't want to say it's not understandable, but I really think it's a deviation of some people just totally pervert it as love, and it's not. Anyone that wants to control you is not someone you need to be with, period. So that was something that I learned very early in life, and passed it on not only to myself but to my children as I grew up.
I love that. Talk
Jealousy
to me
is
a little
not
bit
love.
about, absolutely not. Talk to me a little bit about the impact that you hope your book will have on our society, on women, on the communities that you serve, and a little bit of your community work.
Okay. Well, in terms of the book, I just want people to realize how important words are. I mean, and a lot of people do, they'll say it with regard to one thing, but not another. But words, and maybe I'm just too picky or too um, specific. Words have meanings. We have words for a reason. I mean, it's okay to double a word like cool. Oh, that's cool. Well, actually being cool is kind of a comfortable thing if we're talking about the temperature, right? You don't want to be cold, but being cool is nice. And being cool in terms of your demeanor is a nice thing. So I'm not objecting so much to duality in words or different meanings for the same word. But there are some words that we just really do not need to have dual purposes, particularly when they apply to human beings and bad behaviors. so I just pray that the book will bring that awareness to people that words do matter. They're a lot less, they're more insidious than actions. I've talked about the murder of my sister. That was a big thing, but an action that anyone could foretell the trauma that would result from it. However, with words, it's a lot more tricky. It gets tricky. People don't understand that words have a lasting, or can have a lasting and negative impact as an actual bad action would. And the B word is one of those words. In terms of my community activism, one of my pet peeves, I'll say, is I like truth. I do. As hard as it is many times to confront and face, I think it's always the easier. I just had a conversation with my sister today, and she was saying, lies can get, there's a whole lot of different lies that you have to tell. My grandmother would say, if you tell one lie, you're going to have to tell 5 more lies at least, just to cover that one lie, because you don't know, the lie just has different consequences and ramifications on other things. They don't stand alone. However, there's only one truth. So I have seen as I've gone through life, a reluctance of people to accept truth, and in so far as community activism is concerned, I've seen office holders, elected officials, deliberately lie to people, and people just have disinformation, misinformation, out and out lies that support whatever position it is that they're trying to promote. And it works. It works a lot of times. Unfortunately, that's really one of the things that spurred me to it. But that was an after growth, or I should say an after effect of my initial reason, which was just to give back to my community. I've been very blessed in my life. I think that volunteerism is a great way, and that's literally how I started, getting out of myself. My family was grown. I didn't have to work as hard as I had, and I had more time. And I realized that devoting it to myself exclusively was not gratifying. What was gratifying was becoming a part of the community actively that I had lived in for many years. And literally, it started with the Blue Zones Project, a wellness advocacy, or, that I just bought into immediately. It was so common sense. It just felt right. The 9 basic principles, don't overeat, exercise, don't make it your life so hard by having, I'm so bad, I've got to remove all these things. Just take it one little step at a time, baby steps. And
you are a part of you are a part of a national initiative. I didn't know that Blue Zones was national until I saw it in the National Geographics. I was like, look at Arnette out here with this blue hair doing her thing.
International. I have to correct you. It's international. Because most of the original Blue Zone areas are located outside of the United States.
Had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, and well, Dan Buettner, the founder of the Blue Zones, is a National Geographic explorer. So they actually underwrote the whole, study that he did to put the Blue Zone project together initially. So
I love that. I love that. Yeah. One of the things that I always say is, my mom used to say it, like, a closed mouth won't get fed. Like, you ain't gonna never get nothing if you don't ask for it, right? Yeah. But I kind of added an extension on there, especially once I started doing activist work and local political work, is a closed mouth won't get fed and a closed mind won't grow. And it seems that, particularly in the community that we serve, things are very closed-minded. They're not open. Some people are just not open to change. And when people are not open to change, I look at that as a level of fear. And I think at one point I was a little uh, resistant to that, but I'm actually a lot more grateful for the people that I'm able to meet that are open-minded, that are open to change, and that are open to teaching what you don't know. Because for those of us that do put ourselves out into the public atmosphere, we're
Mhm.
actually saying, I want to know more. I want to learn more. I want to be able to be more effective. I am a habitual complainer. But I have committed to the fact that anything I complain about, I'm willing to work on. And it seems that you also put yourself in a position to work towards solutions in situations where you may not be satisfied with the current status, or just see a better way. And before I let you go, I just want you to talk to me a little bit more about the rest of the work that you do in the community that you serve, and then what's next for you.
So one of the things that I'm currently involved with is, and when I say involved with, it's just through advocacy and trying to support people, other people who are also involved in likewise. And it is the fact that, back up to something you said, and that is the closed minds don't grow, is that our community it's beautiful here. I mean, I've lived here, we moved here in 1991 from Costa Mesa, and Orange County is literally the orange behind the orange curtain, whatever that conjures up in your mind. It's kind of what I lived during the couple of years that I spent there. But moving to Redondo Beach, I felt like, oh, this is home. This is my home. And after 30 years here, it certainly is. And the past 10 plus years, where I have been involved in community activities, I see so much need. There's such a great need for certain development. I mean, I view our waterfront, for example, as a potential, I can't remember the name, Surfside condominiums, that condominium that collapsed in Florida recently. I see that
Yes.
happening here, something very similar. I see narcissistic and malignant narcissistic leaders that have no thought to the future, and that future right now looks pretty bleak for Redondo Beach. And that's, I call it out because it is bleak in some ways if we don't take action now. I mean, what is that? A bird in hand is worth two in the bush. We have
Hmm.
an opportunity to completely restore, rehabilitate, and develop our waterfront. Um, Instead, the powers that be basically said, "Oh, they're terrible people. They're horrible, and you're horrible, Arnette, for supporting them, and you're a liar, and you're this, and you're that." You know, I mean, you can attack the messenger all you want, but the fact of the matter is that we're spending 1.5 million, for example, every year to put lipstick on a parking lot pig that has already outlived its useful life, that is literally going to just become part of the Pacific Ocean if we're not careful over the next few years, rather than work with a developer. Because public funds have never, I mean, there's not one instance in this country where public funds alone have been able to rehabilitate structures or waterfronts that people actually use. And I'm not talking about the highways. I'm not talking about the dams. I'm not talking about the bridges. Those kind of widespread public use facilities absolutely are the government or public money resource, or I should say recipients. They should be. But when you talk about recreational resources, things like that, it's private money that does it. And rather
Yeah.
than work with a developer with some sense of sanity, okay, approach that, well, we don't like this, but we're going to let you, this, you're still within the letter of the law. As long as you're within the letter of the law, we're going to work with you to make that happen. And the particular developer in question, in case of our waterfront, is more than willing to do that, but not so for the malignant narcissists that are running our city.
Well, it's kind of a thing when we see pieces of our waterfront falling into the ocean, but I'm just going to leave that right there. And let's talk about, what you actually have coming up. I know that you are busy, you stay busy, you do great things, you bring joy to the
Oh,
people around you and that do work with you. So I definitely want the audience to know what you have coming up and how they can support you.
okay. So this kind of says it all, and I think it's going to come out backwards, but maybe not. It's,
No, it's good. Be
be happy.
happy, be you.
Exactly. So I've developed an online course. It's going to be rolled out here in the next few days called Happy. And it's an acronym: Habit, Attitude, Purpose, People, and You. And I literally start with the why in you because, as we've already discussed to some extent, being truthful and acknowledging truths it's critical to any development or self-work that you need and want to do. Being happy is not some euphoric state that can be maintained 24/7. Rather, I define it, and it literally is defined in other places, as a sense of contentment. And that contentment always stems from gratitude for what you have, not what you want or what you think you should have or what you're gonna have, what you have right here, right now. Because if I've learned anything over these past months, is that all we have literally is today. So we want to make that day as fruitful and as positive and as productive as we can. And sometimes productivity takes the look of self-care, of just giving in to that tiredness and saying, I'm going to take a nap. Okay. Or
Hey,
doing
I
something
like
that
that.
yeah, you don't necessarily equate with, oh, I'm being productive. I got 10 pages written today. That doesn't have to be it. It's just what being here, being present, being now, and being true to yourself.
I love that. And give
Yeah.
us your social media
Yeah.
and any handles that you want people to follow and support you.
All right. So I have several. One is T-shirts of Los Angeles, and I should have that right here. Let me see. It's a Facebook page, and that tagline is making friends, turning strangers into friends, TSLA. And
Mhm.
it looks like it's on Facebook. T-shirts, I don't know if you can see that. It's a capital T and then shirts of Los Angeles on Facebook. Go on and like it. Literally for the past 6 years, I walk up to strangers and invite them to, that are wearing T-shirts that I think are really remarkable. And I say, can I take a picture of your T-shirt from the neck down? And it always leads to, it's always a positive experience, and it's just good. So you can like that page. I have my Instagram got hacked. I'm in the process of developing one that is happy oriented, and I'll have to get that out later to you. But my personal Instagram page was hacked. So anyway, would rather, no one go on that. But I also have a website, and it's Arnette, ARNETTE.life. And there you'll find out about the Happy Course. There's a segment on the book in there, and there's also T-shirts of Los Angeles. So as I said, the Happy Course will be coming out in a few days, and that will have its own private, it is a paid subscription course. I've kept it reasonable so that anyone can do it. It's also available yearly or month-to-month subscription. And that's about it. Arnette life.life, and T-shirts of Los Angeles right now, and the Instagram will be coming very soon.
Awesome. Super appreciate you spending your time with us, giving us a little insight to your book,
Oh,
your upbringing, your mothering. You mother so many, not just your own. So thank you for
oh,
that. Thank you for being an advocate in your community and continuing to fight for what you think is right. We hope you guys will keep in touch with Miss Travis, support being happy, being your best you. And let me go ahead and just say, leaders and learners will always be here for you to learn about amazing authors and leaders doing great things. It's important that we spend time talking about individuals that make this world a better place. My job is to try to help uncover the story behind the story, because those true stories have an impact on real lives. And that's what we want to focus on. The impact that we can have on real lives doing the real work in the communities that we serve. So thank you guys for tuning in. You know, you can always follow Sand and Shores on all social media platforms. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify, and we look forward to seeing you back here again next week. So thank you, Miss Arnette, and we will see you all.
Tanya.
Thank you so much. I love it. I love you. I love your book and everything that you bring to the table. So you guys take it easy, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks. Bye.